Roughly 4.5 hours of deliberations and done for the day. No verdict, at least not yet. Donald Trump awaiting his fate while making this comparison.
Meet these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged.
President Biden today staying silent, walking past reporters a day after his campaign sent Robert De Niro to the courthouse. Coming up here on the Hill, Jesse Weber on the question the jury had before heading home. Plus, we'll ask Anthony Scaramucci about new reporting suggesting Donald Trump might want help from Elon Musk in a possible second term. And Morgan Ortagus live with us from Israel as she just spent the day with that man right there, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we go. Hanging out with us today, Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Laura Fink is a Democratic strategist. Mark Lauder, former special assistant to President Trump. And Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Happy Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah, it is Tuesday. I just got my mind on whatever
It's Wednesday, but that's okay.
Is it Wednesday? Okay. All I know is the jury got the verdict today, or at least got the instructions today. They are now deliberating. We're going to talk to Anthony Scaramucci about that coming up. Morgan Ortagus spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu today. Morgan was in Israel. We'll get to Morgan. Scott Traynor, by the way, 14 million simulations they have run on what a potential outlook could look like in the upcoming election. Scott's going to be joining us here shortly. But first, Chris, you saw President Biden not wanting to touch this today after Robert De Niro was sent to the courthouse yesterday, and I'm not sure that went as planned for the Biden campaign. But, of course, the big story today is the deliberations for some 4.5 hours. And I was thinking to myself, what's really at stake here, right? On the legal side, we know. Potentially prison, potentially not. But what about it politically? Recent poll. If Trump is convicted, are you more or less likely to vote for him? Nearly 2/3 said it would make no difference in their vote. So what is at stake here politically?
Brother, you could stage The Last Supper with the original cast, and it wouldn't affect 2/3 of the vote. There's more than 2/3 of the vote in this election are banked, hard banked. They are hard Republicans. They are hard Democrats. They are not persuadable. When we talk about this election, and this is a rematch,
right?
5%, 8% that we're talking about, 10% at the most of Americans who are truly persuadable. So it doesn't matter what the 2/3 think. It matters what those folks at the margin think. And by the way, how does this fit into the longer narrative that's going to roll for another 5 months yet after this?
What about with independents at 63%? So like if you're not a Democrat, not a Republican, you're in the middle. Not saying you're a persuadable.
That's the secret, which is independents are not more moderate than other people. They exist on a political continuum. They have Bernie Sanders is an independent.
Right.
And, right. And so is like Ted Nugent. So the independent vote is a parallel spectrum that goes from left to right. And a lot of independents are usually Republican voters, and a lot of independents are usually Democrats.
I'm not sure that you heard him there off the top, but Trump said today, Mother Teresa couldn't beat these charges. That's what he said. What's the expectation game that he's playing here?
Look, I think in those remarks, Donald Trump is trying to appeal to his base there. He is very much trying to make himself seem like he is the victim of a political trial, a political persecution, if you will. So, look, I mean, in terms of what Trump is expecting, we'll see. I mean, this will could come down to one juror could change this all. But Trump, they're very much trying to use this as a political stump, if you will, a campaign stump.
What's he doing there?
Lowering expectations. So if he is convicted, not even Mother Teresa could beat these charges with a conflicted judge, conflicted family, trumped up charges. And if he beats it, well, then he's done something that not even Mother Teresa could do.
That's right.
What do you expect out of him these next 2 days? I mean, we know we're not going to get the verdict tonight. We don't know when we're going to get it, right? Could be tomorrow, could be Friday, could be next week for all we know. What do you think it's like right now? And I suspect you would know or have a hunch within his team and within his circle.
Well, I think you're going to see more of the same. I mean, he will use every break, every opportunity to not only attack the judge and the case, but then he will turn it to attacking Joe Biden on the issues that matter: inflation, immigration, crime. He will make the case that, you could go to you get let out of jail if you're an illegal immigrant and beat up NYPD officers, but he could go to jail for, bookkeeping issues. Those are the kinds of comparisons that I think are really going to resonate. But he will use it to his maximum advantage because he can't get out there now 5 days a week. He can't get out there and campaign.
I thought it was notable, Laura, that the president today, President Biden, he could have spoke to reporters if he wanted to. It was his decision not to. Yesterday was the day which they sent Robert De Niro into the courthouse. I'm not sure that went the way that Democrats and the campaign were hoping for. Why stay silent today from the president? When do you think we're going to hear from him on this?
He's the opposite of what Trump is trying to do, essentially saying, Trump is undermining the judicial process. Biden is staying out of it and above the fray. And he has to, in order to hold that line, he can't be talking to cameras. Now, whether or not sending Robert De Niro was the best move, we're throwing a little bit of spaghetti there. But I will say it's better for him to stay far away from this and let the jury do its job.
When there is a verdict, when do you think we hear from him? What setting?
I think you will see him in front of the White House. I think he will talk about this as the work of the third branch of government, as the people, 12 independent citizens rendering a verdict, and as the justice system doing what it's supposed to do, which is to uphold the rule of law.
We got less than a month to the debate. And I bet that's a place Joe Biden would like to talk about that.
By the way, live pictures right now outside of Trump Tower. I think there you go in the background. There is Donald Trump entering his home, waving to the crowd there, spending the day at the courtroom, at the courthouse, a day in which the jury deliberated for some 4.5 hours. And we know that they will be back tomorrow trying to figure out what they are going to do with this case. Come on in, Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor, host of the Law and Crime Network as well. Jesse, and let's keep those live pictures up in case we see anything out of Donald Trump. But Jesse, one of the interesting things today was the jury went in and deliberated, and then they had a question for the judge. Explain what they asked and why, in your view, it was significant.
So first of all, they asked two questions that are going to have to be answered tomorrow. The first is they want a read back of the jury instructions. Not surprising, because 50 pages, and it's very complicated. They're not given copies of it. And this is already a complicated case. But the more significant thing they asked back was they want a read back of the testimony of Michael Cohen and David Pecker, really about Karen McDougal, of all people, and not even Stormy Daniels. And people can look at that and say, well, maybe this jury is taking this case from the very beginning. But I think what they're trying to establish is criminal intent, right? Did Donald Trump have the knowledge about these hush money payments? Did he all just give it to Michael Cohen to take care of? Or was he instrumental in what the prosecution is saying was an illegal conspiracy? What was his knowledge about it? And I think that's maybe where they're going, but I will give a caveat. It's almost impossible to know what a jury's thinking. So we can kind of think about what the jury's asking, but we really don't know.
So use your very educated guess, because once we found this out, as you might imagine, some might say, oh, that's good for Donald Trump, or oh, that's good for the prosecution. Could you read into it one way or another?
You can't, but I will tell you it is a good thing that they're asking questions. Why do I say that? I say that because you want a jury that is contemplating this evidence. You don't want a jury that comes back in 15 minutes with a verdict. Now, Donald Trump, I believe, has said today that every minute that goes by is better for him. It's a way of looking at that, right? You only need one juror for a hung jury, and that would be a win for him. But at the same point, if they're deliberating on the evidence, they're thinking about it, and this is not a straightforward prosecution, that could be beneficial for the defense. But you also have to think maybe there's some holdouts there, and you have a majority who want to convict Donald Trump. So we shall see.
All right, we shall see potentially tomorrow. Jesse Weber, I'll probably talk to you again then. NewsNation legal contributor.
Good seeing you.
Thank you, sir. By the way, as Jesse was talking, you probably saw Donald Trump duck in there to Trump Tower. He is back home for the evening. We'll see him again tomorrow. All right, Anthony Scaramucci, come on in, the investor, entrepreneur. You probably know him as the former Trump White House communications director. He also has a new title. He's the author of the new book, From Wall Street to the White House and Back. Mooch, it's great to see you. Great to talk to you, my man. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it.
I think the last time I saw you in person, I was actually in the White House, and I see Mark Lotter there as well. Say hi to Mark for me. I think the last time I saw him, I was in the White House.
Mark was telling me before the show the last time he saw you was inside the White House. I think physically the last time I saw you was then, but we've talked since. Mooch, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So I want to get your reaction because you know Donald Trump fairly well. I want to get your reaction to what he said earlier today. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged.
What do you take away from him there?
Well, I'm pretty confident that his lawyers have instructed him that the way the jury was instructed by Judge Marchand, it's going to be very tough for them not to come back with some guilty plea on several of those 34 counts. And so I think he's preparing his base and he's preparing himself mentally for a potential guilty plea. And then, of course, as your panelists pointed out earlier, if he gets off, then he's better than Mother Teresa. But if you see that accordion move that he's doing right there, that's a nervous tick of his. And so when he gets upset, he always goes to the accordion move. And so that's a tell that he's bummed out. And by the way, I don't care who you are, and I don't care if you're Donald Trump or John Gotti, you pick the person. If you're in a courtroom and you have this sword over you of a potential guilty plea, a potential guilty conviction,
right?
It's a brutal situation. And so he's expressing that. You can see it in his face. You can see that he's upset about it. And listen, we'll have to see what happens. I don't think it's going to have a big impact on the election. However, the election is still you got a long time between now and the election, and I don't see this having big impact, Blake, one way or the other.
I want to ask you about a story that broke in the Wall Street Journal today. Here's the headline. It says, Inside Donald Trump and Elon Musk's growing alliance. According to the Journal, they report that Musk and Trump discussed the electric vehicle industry and EV tax credits. Musk has asked Trump to return to posting more actively on X, possibly an advisory role if there is a second term as well. You could probably hear Steyerwalt chuckling at that. But what do you make, Mooch, of sort of this courtship seemingly between the two?
Well, listen, I think the Biden administration has fumbled this one. They had an opportunity to court Elon Musk. I think given the fact that Elon Musk owns X, it would be better for that business, probably for Elon, to stay neutral. But he's an involved guy, and I think he tried to get involved with the Biden administration, and for whatever reason they rebuffed him, maybe because he opened up X to more conservative voices. I'm not exactly sure. But I don't know who leaked that. But if I were Elon Musk's PR team, I think that's a good leak on their part, because it just shows that Musk is in a position of influence. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens in terms of the counter approach from the Biden people, whether or not they reach out to him or not. My guess is they will. I think it's in their best interest to try to keep Elon neutral.
What are you hearing about within Republican circles, those sort of big money, wealthy donors coming back to Trump? It struck me in that article, the discussion around the advisory role and voting project took place at a March gathering at Nelson Peltz's sprawling oceanfront estate in Palm Beach with a group of wealthy and powerful friends. It seems like, Mooch, that the money in Republican circles is coming back to Trump, and I wonder what you're hearing.
Well, it's trickling in. It's not coming back to the extent that he would like it to come back. He's well behind Biden in terms of the fundraising. But let's face it, as he gets closer to becoming the nominee, wealthy Republicans will give former President Trump money. It's just the way it works in politics. Power is a Velcro, or power is a magnet for money. And very wealthy individuals, like the ones you're mentioning, want to be close to power. And so he will raise money. The question is, who is going to raise more money? And I think it's clear that the current president is going to raise more money than the former president. And it just has to do with the fact that it's more acceptable. Mr. Trump is still being demonized for the insurrection. He's still being demonized for the documents case. And I guess the only thing I could say about the trial, I just want to add this. If for some reason he is a convicted felon, you know that President Biden's going to use that against them in this advertising. So I think President Biden will end up having more money than Donald Trump.
All right, we'll leave it there. Anthony Scaramucci, best of luck with the book. Great to see you and hope to talk to you again soon.
Good to be on. Thank you.
Yep, of course. All right, still to come here on the Hill over the next 45 minutes. Morgan Ortagus joins us live from Israel. Look at who she just spoke with. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What he told Morgan. That's coming up here on the Hill in about 20 minutes' time. But first, on the other side of the break, Scott Tranner from Decision Desk HQ. He ran it. Get this. 14 million simulations for us earlier this morning regarding possible election outcomes. He will share what he found and what they've built over at DDHQ. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So we see polls all the time, but what are the actual odds of winning? Our partners at Decision Desk HQ and The Hill are now able to answer that question as they launch their 2024 election forecast. Now get this, the model is based on more than 200 data points, including demographics, fundraising, and polling. Our partners at DDHQ then take that data and run more than 14 million simulations. So you're probably wondering, where do things stand right now with 160 days to go until November 5th? Well, the model currently has Donald Trump with a 56% chance of winning the White House in November. And it gets better for Republicans from there. Right now, there's a 77% chance of Republicans winning the Senate, 62% chance they do so in the House. With us to discuss the launch of their forecast, Scott Tranner. He is the Data Science Director for Decision Desk HQ. Scott, 14 million simulations. Tell me about this thing and sort of how y'all view it over there.
Well, I got to say, it's 14,605,000. The data science team wants always to remind me that last 605 is real important.
Yeah.
But I think you hit the high points. Without putting anyone to sleep, polling, demographic data, FEC data, we put that all in there, and we give a probability of outcome if the election were held today. Now, it's not going to be held today. It's going to be held a little over 5 months from now, and so that forecast is going to change.
Why so bullish on Republicans? Donald Trump, it seems like a slightly better than coin flip, but the Senate and especially the House for Republicans, the model shows.
Well, initially speaking, let's start with the House and the Senate. The map for the Republicans on the Senate side is very good. They're going after a lot of seats. They're defending some good seats. The polling and the fundraising data and just the demographic data of the places in the Senate that are contested, Ohio, Montana, those places, very, very favorable for the Republicans, and the model reflects that. On the House, it's bullish on the Republicans to start. We'll see how that plays out as we get more primary candidates solidified in the general election and some of this fundraising and polling comes out. But I expect that to flip too, or at least move around a little bit.
Okay, stand by there for a second. The House, is that a bit of a surprise to you?
Well, as Scott said, there's a lot of football yet to play.
Right, 5 months.
We got a long way to go. The Republicans are in, it would be hard for the Republicans not to win the Senate, given the condition of the map. Now, don't put it past the Republicans. We said the same thing in 2022. So it depends on candidate quality and all that jazz. The House, though, usually that's going to go substantially with the direction of the national popular vote. The House is roughly reflective of the national popular vote. So if Donald Trump, and as we talked about here on Friday, if Donald Trump basically can tie in the national popular vote, he's going to win a big electoral college victory, and the Republicans will win the House.
What does the national political reporter for The Hill take away from all this?
Look, I mean, at this very moment, when we look at the presidential race and the Senate, definitely advantage Republicans. You know, in terms of the House, look, I think that's a little more competitive. I think that's more difficult for Republicans right now because of their very narrow majority, because of the work that Democrats are doing, particularly in states like New York and California. But we'll see. I mean, I think at this moment of time, and, I think when we look at polls, when we look at these pieces of data, these are snapshots in time.
You concerned?
Look, The weather can change, and that's what we're talking about, the environment, and the game plan can change, but the candidate quality cannot. And in this case, we have folks like Bernie Moreno running against Sherrod Brown in Ohio. We've got Kari Lake DOA already in Arizona, and you're going to tell me that the Senate is a go, and then the House gets even more complicated. But Republicans continue to nominate extremists that are easier for Democrats to run against, which means that even if it's raining, Dems could come home with a victory.
What about top of the ticket for you there?
Top of the ticket is hard, but again, candidate versus candidate. I like Joe Biden's steady wins the race versus Trump's erratic behavior. We see the RNC in shambles, a goat rodeo, as Chris might say, and these are problems. Now, they do have the weather on their side, and that's what we're seeing reflected in the polling as of today. There's work to be done.
Not necessarily a technical political definition,
but
it's
in the books.
And, I mean, look, all the dynamics are in favor of Republicans right now, and Republicans can now run, whether you're running for the House, the state House, the governor, all the way up to president. You can run on Joe Biden's inflation, Joe Biden's border crisis, crime in your communities, Joe Biden's focus on things that aren't really important to America, and Republicans win that argument. Even if you vote against Donald Trump, you might vote for your Republican congressional district to get control of the border.
Let me tell you just briefly a quick little story. And the story is Joe Biden's been trending in the right direction in the polls now for several weeks, and the race has moved into a tie. When you look at the DDHQ average, when you look at an average of just high-quality polls, any way you slice it, the last several weeks have been good for Biden. The race has come closer to parity. What happens from here on in is a grueling battle over these 5% of persuadable voters. And we'll get to see the great thing about this forecast, and I can't recommend the DDHQ average enough. It is so much better than the competition. It's so much better than every other site that's a poll aggregator. I use it every day. It is so good, which is you're going to get to see those numbers flip. It's going to be interesting.
Scott, let me leave you with this. Two things that caught my attention. Michigan and Nevada at the top of the ticket. But specifically, President Biden, it gives a 51% chance. Of course, that's essentially a coin flip, right? But it does have him slightly above. But how about this? The idea of the trifecta. Win the House, win the Senate, win the White House. You've got it, speaking of coin flips, as a coin flip right now for Republicans, basically 3x the chance of Democrats.
Yeah, and that's just reflective of the fact that right now the Republicans have a commanding lead in probably winning the Senate, and it's tilted towards Donald Trump in the presidency and tilted towards the GOP in the House. I mean, that is why it's a coin flip for them on the trifecta and so low on the Democratic side. Now, that's going to move around. We're going to see if the Democrats can close the polling gap, close the fundraising gap, but that's where we are today.
By the way, I should mention this updates daily, so we'll be able to see this for the next 160 days or so. Scott Traynor from DDHQ, thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, talk to you soon. All right, still much more ahead here on The Hill. Morgan Ortagus joins us live from Israel. She spent the day, hello, Morgan. It's dark there. What's it, 1 a.m. in Tel Aviv or something like that? Morgan spent the day with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She interviewed Netanyahu. So what did he tell her? Morgan, live from Israel, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So as he confronts criticism of civilian deaths by airstrikes in the Gaza town of Rafah, Benjamin Netanyahu is defending Israel's actions. The Israeli Prime Minister speaking today with Morgan Ortagus.
We're going out of our way, as no government and no army in history has done, to minimize civilian casualties, using millions of text messages, leaflets, phone calls to tell civilians go out of harm's way while Hamas keeps them in harm's way.
Netanyahu spoke with Morgan for her Sirius XM show. Morgan was also the former State Department spokeswoman, friend of the show, as you might know as well, and she joins us live at 1:30 in the morning local time in Tel Aviv. Morgan, we appreciate it. I know that you know that. Fascinating interview that you had today with the Israeli Prime Minister. Tell me about it right off the top. I wonder sort of what your main takeaway was being in the room with him and speaking with him.
Well, I've been in the room with Bibi Netanyahu many times. And by the way, thank you for having me on the show. And it's never too late for The Hill on NewsNation and for Blake Berman. But I've been with Netanyahu many times over the years, and I will tell you, both he and Ron Dermer, one of his longtime senior advisor and ministers, were really inflamed over the issue of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. That's actually not what I expected to come to Israel and talk about. I thought it would be perhaps over this Biden-Saudi-Israel peace initiative that's in the news, but they are obviously still very inflamed over the charges from the International Criminal Court, and especially the news that leaked out yesterday saying that the Biden administration was not going to support bipartisan sanctions against the ICC. So just for a little context here, in the Trump administration under Mike Pompeo's State Department, in which I served, we sanctioned the ICC when they tried to come after our troops who had served in Afghanistan. So we took a tough stance against the ICC, and it looked like definitely Republicans were going to support sanctions against the ICC, and it started to look like Democrats were as well. The Biden administration had harsh words for the ICC after the surprise announcement that they were going to go after Bibi Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister, and potentially others. That was walked back yesterday by the Biden administration, and the anger was palpable today in Israel.
So I want to show, we played some of your interview there with the prime minister on this point of the ICC. Here's what he told you, and we'll speak on the other side.
The United States said that they would, in fact, back those, in a bipartisan way, back the sanctions bill that threatened not only Israel, but threatened America. Now, you say there was a question mark. And frankly, I'm surprised and disappointed because I think it's to the detriment not only of Israel's interest, I think it's to the detriment of America's interest.
Morgan, we've been following, as you know, sort of the political pickle for President Biden, a Democrat trying to hold on to his base with this Israel issue during an election year. You heard a little bit of frustration there from Netanyahu with Democrats. I'm wondering what you may or may not have picked up on as it relates to his relationship right now with the president and sort of how he views our politics right now here at home.
So we didn't get into the politics as much, Blake, but they did say to us unequivocally, and this was said in at least one, if not two meetings, that the Israelis, the Netanyahu administration, believe that the Biden administration is slow walking the military aid. There were accusations of that, and then the Biden administration said no, they were not. But you know, in my meetings and discussions, they did say that they believe they are slow walking the aid. Senator Lindsey Graham did a press conference here in Israel where he spoke about that as well. So to me, that was a takeaway. That's not something that I've seen in the news lately, Blake. That was something that I thought the Biden administration had walked back when they indicated that they may slow walk the military aid. But certainly Netanyahu and his war cabinet feel like it is being slow walked.
A story in the Wall Street Journal in the recent days, the Biden administration is pressing European allies to back off plans to rebuke Iran for advances in its nuclear program. What did he say to you about our posture right now with Iran?
Yeah, so you know Bibi Netanyahu has a long history on the Iran file. He very famously lobbied against the JCPOA, which was the Iran nuclear deal in the second term of the Obama administration. And so he has a stance against the Islamic Republic of Iran that was probably similar to one that we took in the Trump administration at Mike Pompeo's State Department. So the report that you referred to essentially said that the Biden administration was going to what we call the E3. So that's the European that are signatories to the JCPOA, the British, the Germans, and the French, and telling them, hey, wait, guys, let's not take a hard line against Iran at the IAEA. And that, of course, inflamed Netanyahu. He was very passionate on that subject. I think that's going to get a lot of Republican senators and people on the foreign policy right upset as well, because we know that Iran is closer than ever to a nuclear weapon. And one of the things that I worry about, no matter who is elected in November, Biden or Trump, Blake, they're going to have to deal with a range of very bad options on Iran, because Iran very may well try to break out between, from a nuclear weapons perspective, between November and January. That could be something they pursue. But either way, there's a short list of options for dealing with an Iranian nuclear weapon, and it's not one that anybody is going to like.
Morgan, I think we spoke to you last week from the southern border. Now you're in the Middle East. Where are you going next week? Asia, South America? Where are we going to talk to you next?
To hold my baby in Nashville, Tennessee.
I don't blame you. Morgan Ortagus, thank you so much. Great to see you. Safe travels, Morgan.
Thanks, Blake.
All right, talk to you soon. Fascinating interview with her and Netanyahu there.
Fascinating interview, and I think it comes at a time, Netanyahu and Israel has been under a lot of pressure with the humanitarian situation in Gaza for quite some time. But I think ever since Israel made that quote-unquote tragic mistake in Rafah, killing, over 40 civilians, that's really put, I think, even more international pressure.
You heard Netanyahu there say, who else conducts their wars sort of, with the oversight that we do, trying to get folks out of the way, and that's part of his defense tomorrow. Right,
and then I think the Palestinian rebuttal would be like, well, we have nowhere to go. Where do those people, these were refugees, so I think there's just an incredible amount of pressure on both sides, but the images coming out of Rafah this week, not good.
All right, speaking of images, then there's this. North Korea sending hundreds of balloons towards its southern neighbor, carrying an unwelcome payload, bags filled with garbage and excrement. Besides the unpredictability of its dictator, why, you might ask? Well, it's seemingly an act of retaliation, as South Korean activists sent balloons to the north carrying, get this, leaflets criticizing Kim Jong-un, to be expected, along with USB drives filled with K-pop music. Now, the sister of the North Korean leader saying that the balloons carrying trash were, quote, gifts of sincerity for South Koreans who, quote, cry for freedom of expression. South Korea has called the act a clear violation of international law. I think this is what we're dealing with in another part of the world.
It's, but I will say it may be a proportional response. I've heard,
sending K-pop music and then doing that.
I have one son who went through a K-pop phase, and I can say this may be. the North Koreans may be engaging in a proportional response here, having heard it.
At least they're not dropping other things on
At least they're not allowed to drop other things.
Right. Yeah. Let's keep it with USB drives and garbage.
Right. Are we going to end hating on K-pop? I don't know. Let's not.
Are we pro
K-pop?
K-pop?
Dark. That's so dark. I love K-pop.
Really?
I'm not necessarily
K-pop.
hating on it.
No, I am. I'm here for it. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Excrement in
We can
K-pop?
disagree about politics, but I can't sit with you.
No,
That's
okay,
hard.
I wasn't sure that was the image or the headline that we were expecting today, but an international incident, I guess you could say, between the North and the South. All right, other side of the break. We were just talking about this during the break. Jill Biden.
Yeah.
Fascinating what she did today. Was it today? Yeah, I guess, it aired today, if nothing else.
She's the campaign's best asset. They have to use her judiciously, but that was significant today.
So on the other side of the break, we'll get into what Jill Biden did, where she was, what she said about the Supreme Court, and Samuel Alito. You know who he's blaming now? It's kind of a theme here in Washington. Stay with us. Asked to keep your eye on the grand old flag. And that's certainly been the case with two flags for the Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito. And today, he tried to put an end to his flag flying controversy. In a letter, the justice blamed both flags on his wife, writing, quote, I had nothing to do whatsoever with the flying of that flag. As soon as I saw it, I asked my wife to take it down, but for several days she refused. It's not necessarily Bob Menendez 2.0, but here we are again.
Believable. Believable for, I don't know Mrs. Alito, but I know people who know her, and I believe that she is a formidable woman. And I believe the justice when he said, will you take that down? And she told him where he could, what flagpole he could run it up, and I believe that this is all very unfortunate. And we read the profile in the New York Times of the couple that they had the feud with, and it just sounds like a hideous way to live in a neighborhood. And it just reminded me of how much and how often we let our politics divide us, and how poisonous it can be when you let the politics be the main thing instead of a thing that we do so we can all live together.
Do you think he should have, just even doing that and saying, forget who's to blame, whether it's him or the wife, isn't that why you don't do that as a sitting Supreme Court justice? The reason behind it to me, is sort of irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, we had that discussion yesterday on the MTG picture, the things that you are or not supposed to do. And look, you know, it sounds like Mrs. Alito pretty much said, I'm going to do this. And that's the way it's going to be. And as we were joking yesterday, I said, look, if this case ended up in the Supreme Court, I have a feeling Justice Alito would side with the neighbors over their free speech rights, over their obscene political signs.
So Democrats want Alito to recuse himself from the anything January 6th related that comes before the High Court. And he basically said today, ain't happening.
Well, welcome to there's no justice at the Supreme Court, no code of ethics that requires them to recuse from any case, which is unlike any other court in the country. If you clerk for a judge in a county court, you're not supposed to have political bumper stickers on your car. I mean, this is someone who is clearly he knows he's above the law sitting on the Supreme Court. And the old blame your wife thing, that really frosts my cookies, because I come from the town of Duncan Hunter, and I went to high school with Margaret Hunter, and she almost ended up in a jail cell.
Nice callback.
The old blame the wife, that doesn't sit well with me.
All right. Well, the First Lady targeted the Supreme Court today. Jill Biden saying this while appearing on The View.
Can you imagine if we put any more Republicans on the Supreme Court? No. We will lose all of our rights.
The First Lady also drawing this comparison between her husband and his political opponent.
Those polls are going to turn, I'm confident of it, because as time goes on and as people start to focus a little bit more about what's at stake and start to become educated on the issues and the differences between the two men, I believe that Americans are going to choose good over evil.
So, Julia, you're going to lose all your rights and the other side is evil. Is that part of the framing here?
Look, I thought that was interesting.
Which part?
Well, both parts, because we see first ladies, they come out normally, and they're normally used to soften their husband's images or the president's images, and she's taking a very bold stance. And I think it's rare that we've seen maybe Hillary Clinton, but it's rare that we've seen someone. With Michelle Obama, it's when they go low, we go high.
Right, yeah.
So she's going right into it. So I think she's someone that can certainly galvanize the Democratic base. We'll see if this, she's a pretty popular figure, so maybe it does hold.
You think, though, Mark, she's possibly President Biden's best asset and the Democrats' best asset?
Yeah, I mean, he's hugely unpopular, the most unpopular president in 70 years. Kamala's even worse. I mean, so it's either Jill Biden or Pete Buttigieg. I mean, those are pretty much the only two people you can put out there. But as likable as she is, she's still telling people that your concerns about gas, groceries, immigration are stupid. We disagree with you. You do not have real problems. Clinton said, I feel your pain. The Bidens are basically saying you're an idiot for feeling pain, and it's not real.
Is that the message? I didn't hear her say exactly that. I think what you're saying is she didn't necessarily talk about that in those clips, right?
Right.
Is that the message?
She's drawing the stakes. Yeah, she's really laying it out there and saying this is a contrast election. This is who you have to choose between. And she does it in a package, wearing her pink suit, looking just above the fray in so many ways. Jill Biden is an asset. And I think you're also going to see the Biden team go to surrogates more. Surrogates are going to play a critical role in this election, carrying the Biden message, the empathy that you're looking for, Mark, and also the talking about what the stakes are, which Jill Biden did. You're going to lose all your rights. That was a powerful line.
What did you hear from her there?
Well, first, we shouldn't call people evil. That's part of how
the good versus evil.
Calling our political opponents evil is a bad thing, and it's how you get to the foolishness like the Alito's flag and all that stuff. And I will say to you, sir, that there have been more unpopular presidents than Joe Biden, and that included Donald Trump after January 6th. Right? Joe Biden is the most unpopular president running for re-election.
Correct.
So, look. Joe Biden plays an extraordinarily important role for Joe Biden because every political spouse, husband or wife, is vouching for that person to the American public, which is to say, I know who they really are and they're really okay. And Melania Trump did some of that for Donald Trump, but mostly he relied on his daughter, right? Mostly relied on his daughter to do that for him. Like, I know how he seems, but he's really okay. What Joe Biden has to tell the American people is, I know he seems shaky. Right. I know he seems like he's not up to this, but I'm here. I promise when we're together, when we're alone, he's with it. He's okay. And so that's why she plays this extraordinary important role.
And that's why the good versus evil stood out to me, because once you start saying stuff like that.
Yeah, that's too bad.
I also wonder, though, if the use of surrogates is actually going to backfire with them saying that Joe can't go out there and do it himself. Jill, I get it. She's the spouse. She's supposed to. But if they start relying on non-Joe Biden to go out there and sell their message, it's going to become a thing that why can't Joe Biden go out there and sell his own message?
He'll be there, too. And that argument, I think, is baked in the pie.
By the way, speaking of the president, he launched today a fresh pitch to black voters. The president listed what he viewed as accomplishments during his administration, including pardoning thousands of people with marijuana charges, appointing the first black woman onto the Supreme Court, and relieving student debt for black borrowers. The president made the distinction for black voters between him and Donald Trump.
I'm showing you who I am, and Trump has shown you who he is. And today, Donald Trump is pandering and peddling lies and stereotypes for your vote so he can win for himself, not for you. Well, Donald Trump will have a message for you. Not in our house and not on our watch.
Is that going to work? Because he has a problem with losing support among the black community.
Well, he sounds like a golf cart running out of battery as part, and I'm reminded of this every time with Joe Biden. You can have the best strategy, the best plan, the best everything, but he's the one who has to go and deliver the message. I think it is a powerful sign I'll put it this way. If Donald Trump does as well with black voters as George W. Bush did in 2004, Joe Biden will lose the election, right? If the Republicans can get back to being in the double digits, the low double digits, after the nadir of 2016, if they can get back, they'll win.
Okay. All right. By the way, speaking of golf carts, other side of the break, did you see what happened with Scotty Scheffler today? Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins. You're watching The Hill. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. Prosecutors dropped all 4 criminal charges against the world's top golfer, Scotty Scheffler. It comes nearly 2 weeks after police arrested Scheffler during the PGA Championship in Louisville, Kentucky. When he allegedly drove around a police barricade, the arresting officer accused Scheffler of dragging him with his car, causing minor injuries. Scheffler today posting on Instagram, quote, "This was an unfortunate misunderstanding. I hold no ill will toward Officer Gillis." Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. It was shocking to me when we saw that video of no one reacting when Scotty Scheffler allegedly did something really bad, that they dropped all the charges.
Well, and not only that this police officer who wrote in his report that he was thrown to the ground in the videotape did not get thrown to the ground.
The clothes ripped beyond repair. So, how many years did you do local news?
Yeah.
A lot. I did it for a lot. I'd never seen that in a police report before.
No. What was it Rodney King said? Thank God for videotape, which is how Scotty Scheffler feels.